She was 14 years old when she crossed a border she would never cross again. And in that moment, dressed in layers of silk, stripped of everything Austrian, handed like a diplomatic package from one empire to another, almost no one stopped to ask what she was feeling. That tension is what drew me to her story. Not the diamonds, not the guillotine, but the quiet, enormous weight of a life that was never quite her own. For years, I have studied women's history through paintings, engravings, private letters, and surviving court records. I use modern tools, including artificial intelligence, to reconstruct those images and bring them closer, to zoom into the face in a Vigée Lebrun portrait, to trace the pattern on a gown, to step, in a sense, into a room that has been frozen for 2.5 centuries. What I find there is almost always more complicated than the legend. This is the history of Marie Antoinette. Not the myth, not the caricature. The woman. Imagine the bedroom, not as a place of rest, but as a theater. It is sometime around 8 in the morning at the Palace of Versailles, and the room is already in motion before she has opened her eyes. The heavy silk curtains are the color of pale gold. The walls are paneled in white and gilt, carved with garlands and pastoral motifs, the ceiling arching overhead with painted clouds. The air smells faintly of beeswax candles and powdered violet. A woman of the wardrobe enters, carrying a basket. Inside, clean chemises of white linen, handkerchiefs, folded towels. A first waiting woman follows, and she holds before the queen a large book, the Gazette des Auteurs. Its pages thick with small swatches of fabric, silk, velvet, muslin, lawn, each one pinned in place, each one representing a gown from a wardrobe that contained hundreds. Marie Antoinette, blinking awake, must choose 3: a formal gown for mass, a lighter dress for the afternoon, and an elaborate evening gown for whatever the night would bring. A concert, a card game, a supper watched by courtiers as if it were a stage performance. She chose by pressing pins into the fabric samples. The gowns would arrive later, carried in large baskets covered with green taffeta. This was not getting dressed. This was a ceremony, and it was only the beginning. Before she could touch her own body, the room had to fill. Hierarchy determined who handed her each garment. A duchess outranked a countess outranked a lady-in-waiting, and heaven forbid the wrong person slipped the chemise over the queen's shoulders. On cold mornings, the chemise passed through multiple hands while Marie Antoinette stood shivering, her arms bare, waiting, while the women sorted precedence among themselves. She once described the whole process in a letter to her mother in Austria as both maddening and ridiculous. And yet she endured it. Every single morning. Breakfast, when she managed it, was simple. Coffee or hot chocolate. She preferred chocolate. And sometimes a kipfel, a small crescent-shaped Austrian pastry that was the only edible fragment of the world she had left behind. She ate quickly, often standing, because the next obligation was already waiting. At 11, her hair was dressed. The hairstyles of the 1770s and early 1780s were not merely fashion, they were architecture. Her hairdresser, Léonard Autier, created structures that rose up to 3 feet above her head, sometimes incorporating models of ships in full sail, miniature garden scenes, or cascades of ostrich plumes. These were the famous poufs, and they made rooms difficult to navigate and carriages nearly impossible. Women reportedly knelt on the carriage floor or rode with their heads out the window. At candlelit Versailles, the towering creations were a genuine fire hazard. At noon came the grand toilet, the most public moment of her private life. Folding chairs were arranged for those permitted entry. The queen was dressed before an audience of noble observers, some of whom she barely knew. Her body was covered in layers. First the linen chemise, then the stays, a stiffened corset that compressed her torso and shaped her silhouette into the fashionable form. Then came the panniers, the wide hoop underskirts that pushed her skirts out at the sides, sometimes to enormous widths. Over all of this, the gown itself, the robe à la française, with its great box pleats falling from the shoulders. its stomacher decorated with bows and ribbons, its cuffs trimmed with cascading lace. The women who attended her had trained for this. Every pin, every hook, every adjustment happened according to protocol. Rose Bertin, her celebrated modiste, her so-called minister of fashion, supplied gowns in fabrics that France's textile workers had spent weeks producing. The queen wore the same outfit no more than once, without significant modification. That was not vanity alone. It was the law of Versailles, the relentless engine of consumption that kept the French silk industry alive and the court's social competition burning. What is harder to see, looking at the portraits, is how little room there was inside all of that splendor. Physically, yes. The corsets compressed her organs, the hairstyles limited her movement, the panniers made doorways narrow, but also emotionally. She was watched constantly. She had written to her mother that the public dinners, the public walks, the public card games left her almost no moment that was truly her own. She was 20 years old. She had been performing since she arrived in France at 14. In 1774, when Louis XV died and her husband became Louis XVI, she was given the Petit Trianon, a small, elegant chateau on the grounds of Versailles that the previous king had built for his mistress. It became the one place in France where Marie Antoinette could almost breathe. At the Petit Trianon, she did not have to tolerate the same crushing etiquette. She was sometimes seen strolling through the gardens in a muslin dress and a wide, floppy hat, incognito, as much as a queen could be. She decorated the interior herself, choosing pale blue silk hangings and delicate Sèvres porcelain. She had the gardens redesigned in the English naturalistic style she preferred. Winding paths, an artificial grotto, a small lake. She commissioned a model farm, the Hameau de la Reine, where she and her ladies played at pastoral simplicity, whitewashed cottages, a dairy, flowers. It sounds like escapism. It was, partly, but it also reflected something genuine in her, a longing for the kind of uncomplicated life that her position made structurally impossible. She loved her small theater at the Petit Trianon, where she and her close circle performed plays. She loved music, she sang, and played the harp. These were not frivolities. They were the parts of herself she could only express away from the formal machinery of court. But even the Petit Trianon had its costs. Her retreats were perceived as rejection by the thousands of courtiers who depended on proximity to the queen for status and patronage. Her close friendships with the Princesse de Lamballe and the Duchesse de Polignac were weaponized in pamphlets that circulated through Paris, growing steadily more vicious. The same newspapers that once praised her beauty now mocked her as Madame Deficit, accusing her of draining the treasury while the people of France went hungry. Some of the spending accusations were exaggerated, some were not. She spent enormous sums on fashion, on the renovation of her rooms, on gambling at cards. France was in a grave financial crisis. The disconnect was real, and it was dangerous. And few people around her told her so plainly enough, early enough, to matter. Then came 1778, and with it, her first child. Marie-Thérèse Charlotte was born in December. Her second child, a son, was born in 1781. At last, the heir the court had demanded for 11 years. She wrote of her children with unmistakable tenderness. She worried about their health, their education, their futures. She adopted several children beyond her own. This was not the image of the woman the pamphlets described. But Paris did not read her private letters. The summer of 1789 changed everything. And even then, the change did not arrive in a single dramatic instant. It arrived in increments, in bread shortages and rising prices, in crowds gathering in the streets of Paris, in a restlessness that the gilded world of Versailles had spent decades pretending not to notice. In October 1789, a march of thousands of women from Paris arrived at Versailles demanding bread, demanding the king's presence in the capital. The royal family was escorted to the Tuileries Palace in Paris. The gates of Versailles closed behind them. Marie Antoinette never returned. The following years were a slow erosion. The correspondence she maintained with foreign courts, including her brother, the Austrian emperor, was used against her as evidence of treason. In June 1791, the royal family attempted to flee France, reaching as far as Varennes before being recognized and brought back to Paris in humiliation. The open cart carrying them back to the city was surrounded by a silent, hostile crowd. Silence, in that moment, was more frightening than shouting. By August 1792, the monarchy was effectively over. The family was imprisoned in the Temple, a medieval fortress tower in the center of Paris. Their rooms had wallpaper and a flushing toilet. Their food was still served on silver, but the guards were hostile. Smoke was blown in her face. Her title, Your Majesty, was replaced, first informally and then officially, with Widow Capet. In January 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine before a crowd of 20,000. He had extracted a promise before his death that no harm would come to his family. Marie Antoinette, barely speaking in the days that followed, barely eating, refusing to walk in the gardens because the path required her to pass the king's empty rooms, she may have believed that promise might hold. In July 1793, commissioners arrived at night and took her 8-year-old son, Louis Charles, away. She struggled against them. She lost. She spent the following days pressing her eye to any crack in the wall she could find, trying to catch a single glimpse of the boy she would never see again. On August 1st, she was transferred alone to the Conciergerie, a damp, Gothic prison on the Ile de la Cité, known simply as the antechamber to the guillotine. She was prisoner number 280. 2 gendarmes watched her at all times. She had no privacy, day or night. Her hair had turned white from stress. She was 37 years old. Her trial lasted 2 days. More than 40 witnesses were called. She was accused of treason, of depleting the treasury, of conspiring with foreign powers. She answered questions with short, careful replies. I do not recall. I never heard anything of that kind. When one accusation crossed a line so vile she could not stay quiet, the prosecutor claimed she had committed incest with her own son. She turned to the audience in the courtroom. Nature itself refuses to respond to such a charge laid upon a mother, she said. I appeal to all mothers who are present. The courtroom stirred. It did not matter. In the early hours of October 16, 1793, she was found guilty. She had expected, at worst, life in prison. She was given the death penalty instead. She had hours. She used them to write a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, a letter that expressed her faith, her love for her children, her clear conscience. The letter never reached Elizabeth. She put on a plain white dress. White was the mourning color of the queens of France. Her head was shorn. Her hands were bound behind her back with a rough cord. She was placed on an open cart. Her husband had been given a closed carriage. She was not. And she was driven for over an hour through the streets of Paris while crowds jeered. At the Place de la Révolution, she climbed the scaffold steps. She accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. She apologized to him. At 12:15 in the afternoon, it was over. She was 37 years old when she died, born the 15th child of the Austrian Empress, Maria Theresa. Married at 14 to a man she had never met, queen at 18, imprisoned at 36, dead at 37. What strikes me, looking back across all of it, and I have spent a long time looking, is how little agency she was ever genuinely given, and how much she was blamed for the consequences of decisions she did not make alone and often did not make at all. She was chosen for her role before she understood what it meant. She was shaped by a court that required performance in place of personhood. She was vilified for expenses that the system of Versailles had made obligatory long before she arrived. And when the world she had been handed collapsed, she became its most convenient symbol. That is a very old pattern. Women positioned at the intersection of power and visibility, required to embody the institution they serve, and then made to bear its failures as if those failures were personal sins. Marie Antoinette was not the cause of the French Revolution, but she was, as historian Antonia Fraser has noted, deliberately targeted to bind the French in a shared act of condemnation. What has changed since then? In some ways, a great deal. Women are no longer handed across borders as diplomatic instruments before they are old enough to consent. They are no longer dressed by committee in the mornings while an audience observes. The particular cruelties of Versailles are gone, and yet the pattern of visibility and blame, of judging a woman's worth through her appearance, her spending, her relationships, her body, that pattern has proven remarkably durable. The last image we have of her, in David's quick courtroom sketch from October 1793, shows a woman sitting very straight. Her hair is white, her face is composed. Whatever she felt in that room, she did not let the room see it. She had been performing since she was 14. By the end, the performance and the person had become perhaps the same thing. There is a woman in every century who is handed a role too large and too rigid for any human being to inhabit cleanly, and then judged for how she wore it. Marie Antoinette was not the first. She was not the last, but she was one of the most watched. And understanding how we watched her tells us something important about how we have always watched women. If there is a woman, or a place, or a time in history that you have always been curious about, leave it in the comments below.